Chair, we are live.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm calling this meeting to order. We are the Historic Districts Review Board, in case you didn't know where you were. And today is June the 25th, 2024. May we have a roll call, please?
Madam Chair Rios,
Here.
Vice Chair Guida,
Here.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Here.
Member Beescheid.
Here.
Member Mather,
Excused,
Member Benvenu.
expected.
Madam Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. Under old business, item A, 2024-00416 HDRB 700 Seco Madre withdrew the request until further notice. And item C, postponed to date certain, 2023-00874 HDBR 635 Garcia Street, Unit 2 and 3. And item D, 2024-00849 HDRB 403 San Antonio Street, postponed to date certain on July 9th on both of them.
Thank you, Mr. Mokino. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as just amended?
Rita moves to approve as amended.
Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beescheid.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion is passed.
Thank you very much. We do not have minutes on this particular agenda, but we do have findings of fact and conclusions of law. And there's only one, and it's from April the 23rd, 2024. Changes to this? No changes? I will entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve the findings of fact and conclusion of law for April 23rd, 2024.
Rita seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beescheid,
Yes.
Member Benvenu.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion is
Thank
passed.
you very much. Matters from the public. Anyone here wishing to speak about matters related to H board? Come forward.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Stephanie Beninato. I have a couple of things I wanted to point out or talk about. I appreciate that you gave the variance to 716 Don Gaspar for the solar. And I think it's important to remember that even though perhaps the panels are going to supposedly pay for the electric bill, that you're paying for the system, and that you pay for the system for several years before you get free electricity. So in just determining or thinking about financial benefit, I think it's important to remember that. And I do say that I know that my daughter and son-in-law worked really hard on that house and they insulated it, but it still was always a cold house. So hopefully this helps them to keep it a little bit warmer. I also wanted to talk about a little bit and maybe ask that you reconsider the decision on Agua Fria Street. And I asked for that. I know that Member Bienvenu made the wall or the fence on Agua Fria itself being no more than 5 feet as opposed to 6. But I'm not sure it's clear what the height is on Cleveland and Irvine. And I do think that considering cost, if you're considering that, then I think perhaps the owners could have foregone the pergola and put the money into making more appropriate walls on those streets. And I found it interesting to contrast that case with the case on Canyon Road, I believe it was. So here we have the people in Agua Fria coming here several summers, thinking they know exactly what they need to do for the ordinance and not really doing anything actually correctly. And then being unwilling and actually kind of threatening, well, we'll just sell the property reminded me of the architect from St. John's who threatened to do something to the wall, the interior wall. But then, you know, and finance was a consideration. Then you have the other people who also, and had money, obviously had money. And they're also new, and they also thought they knew what Santa Fe style was. And yet I thought you were much more onerous with their new construction than you were with preserving the view, particularly the view and the streetscape, I would say, on Irvine and Cleveland. And I do know the prior owner of that significant structure. I met her through a meeting here, but went to her house several times, and she lived there by herself and didn't seem to feel the need for a fence. And I know that she made significant improvements both to the interior of that house and to all the garden space outside. Thank you. And again, I would ask one of you who voted for it to perhaps consider taking it off the table and reconsidering it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else in this audience wishing to come forward and comment on anything that's on your mind? Anyone on Zoom?
One moment. Apologies. Chair Rios, no hands are raised.
Thank you, Heather. Now we go to staff communications.
Yes, Chair Rios, the first item that we have for the Historic Districts Review Board is Greg with the Historic Santa Fe Foundation is going to be making a presentation on the Endangered Properties Program. You may recall that we applied for and received a grant from the state of New Mexico through the Certified Local Government Program for $24,000 to start a pilot program in order to assist with property maintenance and upkeep for those people in the historic districts that are struggling to do so. So I will defer to Greg to make the presentation, not steal his thunder.
Thank you. You said just about it all. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Greg Walke. I'm on the board of the Historic Santa Fe Foundation. And I'm here to talk about the Endangered Properties Program that's new to our foundation, although we've been thinking about it for years. You've probably read an article or two or seen press releases about this program, but I wanted to give you a little background and to bring you up to date with what we're doing on the project right now. For many years, we at the foundation have had a concern about buildings in the historic districts and in our neighborhoods that really need maintenance, repair. They're neglected or are falling apart in one way or another, and for various reasons. There are many reasons that this happens. Even if the particular buildings in question are unremarkable, the fact is that they lead continuity to the fabric of our neighborhoods. And then there's an even more important factor, and that is that another level of preservation that we're interested in is in preserving the neighborhoods themselves, in preserving our cultural traditions, and in maintaining homes for people who have lived in these neighborhoods for a long time. And coincidentally, things like generational ownership of homes. That isn't always possible when a property deteriorates and the owners lack the resources to put into it. And that could include money. As you know, it's expensive to maintain historic properties. It could include technical expertise or just knowing what is the best practice for maintaining a historic property. One of our former board members, Mac Watson, several years ago, put forth this program proposal. And our former executive director, Pete Warzel, ran with it. He formed a committee of local business people and preservation-minded community leaders. And they have been promoting and working to get this program going. But we did need a pilot project. We needed funds and partners to begin. And the city stepped up in a great way for that. The city's Historic Preservation Department under Gary Heather, and they're very professional teams, worked on putting together this proposal. Nicole Thomas wrote the grant. There was a $24,000 community CLG grant, Community Local Government Grant, through the state HPD to the city HPD and through contract to Historic Santa Fe Foundation. So that was the first partner and the first funds that we needed. The other partner was Santa Fe Habitat for Humanity. And you probably are all familiar with their repair program. It's been successful, it's ongoing. They have funds available from the Mortgage Finance Authority to provide up to, say, $85,000 per project towards repair projects. And they felt that partnering with us would give them an opportunity to pursue projects in the historic districts and in historic neighborhoods, and to work with traditional materials, methods, techniques that they don't often work with. It would also give them the opportunity to work on community preservation, which is the other arm of our program. Besides just the building themselves, you've got the communities and the neighborhoods. So their input's also extremely important in that they are helping with determining eligibility, income eligibility for folks, and also managing volunteers and construction on the projects. The stated goal of the grant was to sustain traditional community by assisting with stabilization repairs to allow low-income homeowners to safely stay in their homes and to retain family ownership. The parameters for doing this include the designated historic neighborhoods, as well as maybe any other neighborhood within the city of Santa Fe that's 50 years or older. Properties in those neighborhoods that represent the vernacular traditions of building and design. Projects that might highlight cultural traditions of design and use. And here we're thinking a lot of generational ownership. And projects that maintain housing for low-income owners and maintain that generational ownership. A typical project might be something like stabilizing walls, adobe walls, roof repairs, correction of site drainage, stucco repairs, repair or replacing of rotted wood, windows, floors, doors. The replacement of floors is helpful in terms of addressing accessibility and mobility challenges in historic homes, that particularly for someone who's lived there for a very long time and may need to face those challenges. And then just bringing the property up to code, which pretty much covers everything under the sun. The projects under this grant will include technical advice, education in best practices, and then we also intend to do oral histories of the homeowners to talk about the history of their home and of their neighborhood and of their neighbors and the community around. So where are we in this process? The biggest well, let's say the biggest work we faced so far is narrowing down the list of properties to maybe 3 test pilot projects. We don't have all the money in the world, and so we need to focus on work that can be done and be successful. We've created a long list of potential properties. The city's HPD has been very helpful in coming forth with properties they've noticed that might fit the requirements. Habitat has a long list of properties for their repair program, and many of them fit these parameters of historic neighborhoods as well. So it's been a collaborative effort. We've gone through the list, narrowed it down to maybe 12 to 14 properties and looked at them very, very closely to try to fit them into the criteria of the various programs. As you can imagine, with all of these sources of income and input from different groups, there are a lot of requirements and a lot of parameters and criteria. The main ones are that they be owner occupied, that the owner be low income, that it be in the city limits, and that it's at least 50 years old or within one of the designated historic districts. We've initiated communication with several of these homeowners, and that's where we are in that process right now, kind of pulling together those initial 3 or so pilot test projects. In addition, we have created a site hub on the foundation's website. We've created promotional materials in English and Spanish. We've announced the program with published articles and notices. All the contracts have been executed and milestones for schedules established. So we're kind of into the project, but in the middle of things. We're enthusiastic about the possibilities of this project, the test pilot project right now, and for the future of this program. We think we may be able to extend this beyond the city limits into the county, into traditional neighborhoods, into other communities, and someday may be able to fund even more projects at once. But baby steps, we start first where we are and with what we have. And with the great help of the HPD and Habitat, I think we're going to see a lot of progress with this program. So that's what I wanted to tell you, and that's all in a nutshell. If you read the articles, you probably know more about the kind of the background and examples of such a program. But I thought I'd open it to questions. If you have any, I'd be open to questions. Can we do that, Heather?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walkie,
Yes.
thank you very much for your very thorough presentation. And thanks to the Historic Santa Fe Foundation for putting this program into practice at some point. Sounds like you have covered all the bases from your presentation. It sounds very well thought out. And I think it's a very good program. Questions, comments? Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate the goals of the program, particularly around equity and affordability and the ability of low-income folks to stay in their homes. I heard you say that the homes that would be selected even in this first round may not be in the historic districts, that they may lie outside. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
The goal is we've been looking for properties within designated historic districts. And the one property that we're fairly certain we're going to move ahead with is. But we've widened our search a little bit to include some older neighborhoods that may not be designated. And that's just so we have some properties to begin with. The grant itself says within the designated historic districts or communities that are 50 years or older. And sometimes there are even isolated buildings by themselves. I don't know how that fits in the neighborhood situation, but everything we've looked at so far is in a neighborhood that could be considered historic, and the buildings themselves.
Sure, sure. And it's not to discount that work wouldn't be important for anywhere in the city, right? I think, but we do have a lot of neighborhoods that are over 50 years old. And I guess I'm asking the question just in terms of this pilot program that you're suggesting. It seems to me that, the need for this grant program, in the first place, and then the potential of it, in terms of outcomes, would speak to our historic zoning ordinance that we're currently reforming. We know from reports that city staff have generated that, the gentrification on the east side and in our historic districts has displaced Hispanic families by more than 60%. Over the last 50 years, we know that a lot of low income folks have moved out. And I'm just wondering what might be some, and you may not be able to say at this point, but like what might be some of the feedback that would come out of this in terms of facilitating plan check and review by the historic division. Would it make recommendations for changes in the zoning code for historic districts? If you're kind of aiming the program at equity, like what are the implications for this long term?
Yeah, it may be a little late for some of the historic districts. There are areas that are already well gentrified, and that exodus has taken place. But I think that there are historic districts that are not so gentrified and include plenty of these properties where people are hanging on. And I think that the focus of most of the historic district reviews are the buildings themselves. What is the design? What is it going to look like? And so forth. I don't know that the issue of equity and things like generational ownership can be addressed in a code, perhaps not, but they can be addressed through programs like this. And that may be the best way. But I think it's a good idea to consider it and think about it when you're looking at projects. I've never thought about how that could be written into the code or not.
Yeah, I for one would love to talk about it. So I think it's great work and it has a lot of legs.
But I do know that we've discussed the issue of this particular grant because it has a timeline and a tight schedule. We're going to run into the issues of if something needs to be done to a building, replacing the windows or restuccoing, re-roofing, it has to come to HPD for a permit and to the city for a permit and to HPD. So we've had those discussions about looking for ways to deal with that, both for the program and maybe for the long run too. There might be something that develops out of that that would be good for us.
Right. Thank you.
Board members, any other comments or questions? No? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm glad you're aware of it and keep us in mind. I'll be back to let you know what happened.
All righty, thank you. Under staff communications, we have 275 East Alameda Street.
Yes, Chair Rios, that is going to be postponed to next time. The applicant was not able to attend tonight unexpectedly. So that will be considered on the 9th of July. And I would like to say that the Historic Santa Fe Foundation is an amazing partner and really great to work with. And so the community partners are what make historic preservation successful in the city. And so I always appreciate our collaboration. The one last announcement that I have is tomorrow, there will be the state local government historic review board meeting regarding the proposed demolition of the four casitas on Don Gaspar between 402 and 414 Don Gaspar Avenue, roughly just to the west of the state capitol building. And I just wanted to announce the location and the time. So the location is in the state capitol building because it's itself in room 317, tomorrow starting at 1 p.m. And so there will be presentations from the state as well as from the city, and will be considered by the Historic Review Board at that time.
Thank you, Heather. So is that it for staff
Yes.
communications?
Yes, Chair Rios,
And
thank you.
thank you. So we're going to move on to old business. And before we do, I do have to inform you about appeals. If anyone in this room or elsewhere disagrees with the decision that this board makes this evening, you do have the option to appeal. You would be appealing to the city council, and that would be after the findings and conclusions have been approved, and you have 15 days after that. Also, if you're a person that will be speaking this evening, if you're from the public, you will have a 2-minute limit. All righty? So with that being said, we are going to move to the first case this evening, which is located at 697 Gonzalez. Yes, Heather.
My apologies in interrupting, but I'd like to let the record reflect that Chair Bienvenu has joined the meeting and it has been about 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah. And he's been here for a good while. All righty. And this is Lanny's case. So Lanny, may we hear from you?
Good evening. This is case 2024-08259, HDRB for 697 Gonzalez for new construction on a vacant lot. 697 Gonzalez is located on the east side of Gonzalez, north of Lajano Lane and south of Cayahoya. The 1.8 acre vacant lot at 697 Gonzalez is in the downtown and east side historic district. Properties on Gonzalez Road have sloped lots, and the houses tend to sit back away from the road. The properties on the west side of the road are above the road's grade, while those on the east tend to sit below the road grade. These homes appear as 1 story from the street, but they are 2 stories in the rear with an average height of 24 feet. The lot at 697 Gonzalez is on the east side of the road and sits below the road grade. I will note that the staff report says above, but as demonstrated at the field trip, it is below the road grade. And I appear to have reversed directions in the staff report. I apologize. The Planning Commission heard an escarpment variance application for the property to determine the building area of the structure. The proposed site plan was presented to the Planning Commission and was approved with conditions. The applicant obtained approval of the revised location of the building pad per the Planning Commission condition from the terrain management in 2024. The applicant is proposing to construct a 3,938 square foot residence to a height of 15 feet 6 inches in the front, where the maximum allowable height is 16 feet. The residence is designed in a Pueblo style. This is our ground floor level. And then this is the lower floor in the back, which will make it a 24 foot height. And our little roof plan, I should say, their roof plan. On our west elevation, they're planning an arched entry gate with a stuccoed 4-foot garden wall, a covered 45 square foot portal over the entry door. Solid wooden entry door will be flanked by pergolas. The 2 pergolas, one is at 73 square feet and the other at 56, will be constructed with 12-inch wood stained beams. The windows will all be true divided clad light true divided light clad windows and have a 2-car garage with paneled wood door to the left end of the gated courtyard. Want to change pages for me, sorry. North elevation, it will have the the AC compressor with a 3-foot pony wall to screen it on. And then all of the windows again will be true divided light. The east elevation will show the 2 stories with the overall height of the 24 feet. The true divided light windows, sliding true divided light glass doors on the first floor with the basement. And portals with Viga wraps around the balcony with black wrought iron railing. The south elevation has stairs with a landing and a wraparound porch with black wrought iron handrails, a fireplace with chimney, 2 true divided light windows will flank the proposed fireplace, and 1 true divided light wood clad door at the southeast corner of the portal. Their finishes will include El Rey cementitious in La Luz. The front door is going to be what's called Salty Dog. The courtyard gate will be major blue. The garage door will be walnut, and exterior windows and patio doors will be in dark bronze. And the light fixtures, the Mesa Bear, will be located near the gate in the front door, and the Pueblo flanking the garage doors. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E for downtown and east side design standards.
Lanny, thank you for your report. Board members, any questions for Lanny at this time? Member Beachey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lanny, I have a question about the east facade. It's mostly windows. Is that compliant because they're under portals?
Yes.
Yeah. And then secondly, what is the material the posts are made out of on the east facade? Are they concrete?
Are we talking? Sorry,
Yeah, there,
the posts.
the posts.
Those are all wood.
Great, thank you.
We're done with the questions. Applicant or applicants, please come forward and get sworn in.
Can you please raise your right hand and state your name and address?
Dolores V. Hill, P.O. Box 1835, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87504.
Dolores, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you are in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do so under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Madam Chair, Dolores has been sworn in.
Thank
Very
you.
much. Good evening, Dolores. And what do you have to add to what Lanny just told us? And would you speak right into that mic? Is it on?
Okay. Sorry about that. I must have, I don't know what happened, but anyway, thank you for allowing us to speak in front of you. And I appreciate those who went out today for the field trip, because I think putting up the story poles was an excellent idea. I think it gave you a better idea of where the proposed house will be located on the lot and how far back it will actually be from Gonzalez. I do have Randy Edwards. He's with Sun Valley Construction. He's here to answer any question. He is the contractor. I also have the applicants here, and also Joseph Carnes, attorney, if you have any questions. So I just open it up for any. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. Sir, if you'll come forward to get sworn in. Well, the whole group of you, that whoever's going to speak.
Hey, my name is Randy Edwards.
Joseph Carnes, 125 Lincoln Street.
And Mr. Edwards, state your address.
Sorry, 6 Sunflower Circle, Santa Fe.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony we have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do so under the penalties of perjury? Madam Chair, they've been sworn in.
Thank you very much. Who is taking the podium next? Maybe it would be appropriate for you, Mr. Edwards. We probably do have questions, so somebody. First of all, I do want to thank you all for putting up those story polls. It really did make a difference. And sorry, the men that were out there had to wait quite a while. Apologies.
No problem.
But
Get paid for it.
would you tell us how far back the house will be from the road? And also describe the grade, the present grade, and how you will disturb that grade and what it will look like once the house is going to be constructed.
So you probably have seen on the site plan that the escarpment line actually runs about 80 feet back of curb across the property from north to south. And the closest part of the house to the street is about 98 feet. So we're well behind that escarpment line. And then the variance that was approved on the property basically gave us the ability to build a little bit more in the house in the 20 to 30% range, but nothing in the 30% range, in the over 30% range. So none of the areas that we'll be disturbing will be over 30%. And but most of and you can even tell that in the plans that Lanny showed you, most of the construction for the second floor is actually down the hill. It's not up the hill. So hopefully we'll be disturbing a minimal amount of dirt up on the upper part of that sloped area. And the good news, I think, is that because of the escarpment line, most all the trees, there aren't very many trees on that sloped area that we saw today. Most of the trees are up in the front. And so most of those should be preserved, through the construction, because the only thing going through there will be a driveway.
Thank you. Other board members, you have questions? Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few questions to follow on the heels of Member Beachhead's questions about the drawings. It seems like we maybe have a couple generations of drawings in the set. Seems like the south elevation has changed from the color pencil rendering that we have. It has fewer windows now. I'm assuming that's to meet the 3-foot rule from the corner. I think, Lana, you had a slide
Yes,
with the before and after.
We got comments from staff. We went back and checked.
Okay. Can we also clarify that on the south elevation that the cantilever of the primary suite has been removed?
Yes, it has.
Okay. So the kind of the line drawing and not the rendering is a better representation of the east elevation.
No cantilever of the primary suite.
Okay. And I wanted to follow up on Member Beachhead's question about the posts on the rear portals. Those are stucco, right?
The vertical ones are stucco, I think. Stucco.
Okay.
That's all. Vigas.
And the front portal is all timber, though.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then on the front elevation, is it also the case that the window to the left of the door has been eliminated?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think you checked the boxes off on the style requirements, but just, some of it still feels maybe because of the 2-story facades feels a little stark and Adobe-like, which we're always trying to emulate, as you know, in our district. One thing that I think could help that is that the corners are all going to be bull-nosed, which I understood from the site visit today is in fact the case, correct? And then what about the windows? Will they be deeply inset, which is also something that the code encourages?
Yes.
Okay, I think that'll help too, because especially on those large banks of windows to get some shadowing and modulation in those facades. And then the door, is it wood? The garage door I'm talking about now.
Actually, it was wood,
Okay.
wood clad.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you. The inset for the windows, how much inset will that be?
I think it's 4 to 6 inches.
4 to 6 inches? Thank you. Any other questions, comments, board members? None? Anyone in the public wishing to comment in reference to this particular project come forward?
Please raise your right hand and state your name and recite your address.
Stephanie Benanato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do so under the penalties of perjury?
Yes.
You've been sworn in.
Okay, thank you. I just don't understand the slope. I thought that there was there's a more of a restriction because the second floor is 50% more, actually really, 50% more than what the height is, so 16 feet, and now you have 24 feet. I do understand that it's a small part of the entire structure. And I do think too that like on this west elevation, and I think there might even be another elevation where I think it needs to be clear that which of those drawings we're really talking about there. And I have to say that I understand, I guess, why the garage is at the front of the house, but for me, it's not really harmonious with the idea of being in a historic zone, whether it's clad with wood or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else wishing to comment, come forward? Anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no hands are raised.
Thank you. If board members, if you have no further questions or comments, I am ready for someone to make a motion.
Madam Chair, comment.
Yes.
So we give a lot of scrutiny to projects, particularly in the downtown and east side historic district. We talk a lot about design, a lot of times when we have a contemporary design, we worry about it fitting with the letter of the code. And I guess I'm looking at this project, which, to my eyes, looks like a builder house that could be really anywhere. And it checks the boxes. And I think that, we can focus on, the letter of the code, which is the 3-foot corner window and, the diagonal distance of the windows and all the things that Lanny has helped the applicant to comply with our code. And we could, talk about rounded corners and window recesses and projecting viga tips, but, I don't think it quite gets there. I think it's still an inartful design. I look at that rear east elevation and the kind of misalignment of the columns on the 2 portals and the bedroom volumes on both levels. I'd look at the south elevation, which seems to just be designed by having to comply with the 3-foot rule. And the same thing with the front elevation of the house. And so I'm voicing here a concern about design. If we're only here to judge compliance, then this is compliant. If we're talking about compatibility with the districts and the standard that we hold much better designed buildings to, and then I'm really troubled by an approval of this project.
Thank you, Member Guida. Any other members of this board think along the same lines as Member Guida? If so, please express yourselves. It appears not. Or Member Bichai?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would agree with those comments, and I don't know exactly what the solution is, as Member Guida expressed it. This is a compliant design, but I do I think that the front dominating garage on any project in the historic district is very distracting. We've made the mistake of in my mind, a mistake of approving some of those in the past, and have seen them, see how they look and fit or don't fit on the streetscape. And the east elevation does to me look a bit like a hotel. It has a lot of windows, and I'm not sure. Like the stucco posts are not something that we see a lot of, and there's a lot of them here. So that's sort of what caught my eye. I don't have any specific suggestions, but I would agree with overall sort of discomfort with the design.
Any other questions or comments? No further questions or comments, and I will entertain a motion. Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first a comment, actually. So I don't disagree with some of the concerns that have been expressed, but I do think that we have to give a fairly wide range of latitude to the homeowners to be able to make their own design decisions within the boundaries of the code. And I do recognize that we do have a general overall requirement of harmony with our neighborhoods and our districts. And I do think that's quite important to enforce when it's required. But generally speaking, when something meets the letter of the style standards for any particular district, I start to get uncomfortable with redesigning in an aesthetic manner, even if I would agree that I think a better design could be obtained. So I think that this design isn't perfect by any means. I think there's much worse in the district, especially in recent times. And I do think that it generally does comport with our East Side standards, particularly since it's on the most extreme edge of the East Side boundary. So I'll go ahead and make a motion and see where we go. In case 2024-008-259 HDRB 697 Gonzales Road, I would move that the project be approved as submitted and as further elucidated at the hearing, which would include that the corners are bull-nosed, the windows are recessed, windows, the doors, and the garage openings would all be recessed 4 to 6 inches minimum, and that the garage door be wood clad.
Is there a second to this motion?
Madrano will second. May I propose a friendly amendment, perhaps contingency, on the east elevation, even excluding what's underneath the portals? I'm still concerned that 50% of the walls is not dominating versus the windows. So I would just ask that the applicant submit that to staff and show the square footages of the solid wall versus windows on the east facade. And if it's less than what's required to, I guess, resubmit to staff for approval.
Accepted.
Any other amendments? Roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Guida,
No.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Benvenu,
Yes.
Member Beescheid.
No.
Madam Chair, the motion has failed. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a tie.
Actually, I think I have to break the tie. And would you answer the public visibility of this project? Somebody?
So today, when you guys were out there, you saw that the top of the back of the property sits at 7,274 feet, which is 4 feet below the road. So it's actually not the back of the property.
So the visibility of this project is going to be
Basically zero.
minimal. I think with the improvement of the bullnosing, the inset of the property, and the fact that the public visibility is minimal, I will vote in favor of the project. I do have to say that in reference to Member Beachside's comments regarding garage doors on the front of the project. That's I don't think that's the best location, or even though that's kind of a traditional way of doing garages in many areas, but not necessarily in our historic districts. And but I will vote in favor of the project. Thank you. And we will move on to new business. And to 409 Camino de Montesol. And this is Paul's project.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for being here this evening. In case number 2024008334 HDRB 409 Camino del Monte Sol is a single-family residence listed as contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The earliest date of construction is pre-1914 as seen by the adobe block and wooden viga construction material. Architectural design speaks to a mix of vernacular, Spanish Pueblo revival, and territorial styles as seen by the flat roof and gabled roof sections of the structure, and a mix of recessed and wood frame doorways and windows. The residence has undergone an amalgamation of multiple standalone structures, a guest house, and a detached garage. The structure has undergone several additions, including the connecting of two standalone structures and guest house in the 1980s. The garage addition was shortly constructed shortly after in the 1990s. Historically, this property was constructed and owned by Mr. Jose Quintana and Mr. Severino Vigil. In more recent years, the property was owned by Laura Gilpin, Elizabeth Foster, and Thomas and Jane O'Toole. Previous historic cultural property inventory surveys of the property have been taking place in 1983 and in 1991. Here is an overview photo of the north elevation showing an addition of the pergola in the 1990s, the recessed divided light windows, and the porch. Here's an overview photograph of the east elevation showing Mr. Severino Vigil's property that is now covered in vegetation, and an addition in the 1980s of an entryway to a guest house with divided light and a yard wall. Here's the south elevation showing the recessed windows, the vegetation, and the courtyard. Here's the photographs of the west elevation showing the entryway into the courtyard as well as the standalone garage. Here's historic maps. John Murphy did a fabulous job on his HCPI form, showing the history of the structure. And the structure is so unique. So here is a map from Jose Quintana showing the original house footprint, as well as B. Severino Vigil's property located in the back. Here's an aerial photograph from Mr. Murphy in 1948. Although blurred, you can see the structures, blurred imagery of their location. Here's a 1958 aerial photograph of the map showing Mr. Quintana's structure, the gabled roof structure, as well as the flat roof structure, separated by an open space. And then Severino Vigil's property to the back, now kind of all encompassed as one large property. Here's a 1973 aerial photograph showing the gabled roof structure, the flat roof structure, and Severino V Hills property, and how the gabled roof structure and the flat roof structure are now separated. See, leave this structure shows their the addition of these two structures as one. Here's a 1983 HBI survey photograph of the original survey of the property. From Camino del Monte Sol, as we look east, this would be the original structure of the flat roof portion of the structure that you would see from the road. Now, John Murphy does a wonderful job putting this all together, showing the additions of this structure. So in A, you have the pergola of 1990s. You have in B, the addition of the kitchenette in the 1990s. C and D, the addition of combining Severino V Hills property and Mr. Quintana's property all into one structure. And I believe that was done in the 1980s. The removal of the garage or carport, which is located as F. G, the porch that is now there on the southern facade. H, the enclosure of the portal added, and I, the standalone garage. Here is staff's facade diagram. Staff has reviewed this entire structure in its entirety, and it's quite a large property. And it's a wonderful property in which it shows the evolution of time for different structures in the historic districts. The southern facade, identified as number 3, is staff's recommendation as the primary facade. Here's the south, west, and east elevations. The north and west elevations. And the floor plan. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be maintained as contributing, with the southern facade designated as the primary, identified in the facade diagram as number 3, due to the historic doors and windows per 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. Staff stands for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul, board members? Paul, did John Murphy agree with you on the south elevation as being primary, or did he indicate perhaps other elevations?
Chirios, John Murphy recommended the northern facade where the portal is located as the primary. He identified it as it being holding the most integrity of the contributing to the structure.
And would you describe that that portal?
The portal is, I would identify it as being territorial.
Do you have a photo of that?
In design, I do not. This is the closest I have to it. The portal would be, I would see it as territorial in design with the white wooden beams. However, it does have a recent added Kiva fireplace. He calls it a honeybee fireplace, but it's more of I believe, a Kiva fireplace tucked into the back that was established in the 1990s. It does have recessed doors and windows. You can see the adobe block wall is very thick. So he believes that to be the primary facade.
The portal has on the field trip, I think I noticed it just has 2 doors, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
No windows, just
You're correct. 2 doors.
2 doors. And would you further describe the north facade? the portion of the building that is pre-1914, which makes it over 100 years old.
So the area that is gabled, has the gabled roof, the pitched roof, and the flat roof directly to the west, both of those structures would be pre-1914, as well as Severino V. Hill's property that was the addition of the guest house. So those three structures, and I apologize, during the site visit, I had mentioned that that structure was 1958, but that structure as well would be pre-1914 as
The entire,
the gabled pitched roof area, as
Mhm.
well as the structure directly west of that.
so that would be the north facade, the north elevation.
Chair Rios, that is correct, yes. And here in the historic photograph here where Mr. Murphy has circled in red and put the arrow, before those two structures were added as one structure, these two structures served the Quintana family. And then over time, it became the children's family, just generationally. And it wasn't added as one complete structure until the 1980s after Gilpin passed. So both of these structures would be pre-1914. And the north facade, it is very intact. You can see that in the windows, the window frames, the window sills, the doorways, and there has been some additions and some alterations. There has been. But relatively, the doorways and windows stay relatively intact as we see them today.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? None at this time. Applicant or applicants, please come forward. And Mr. Carnes has already been sworn in.
Thank you, Chair Rios, members of the board. Joseph Carnes here on behalf of the applicant Jeremiah Collatz. He's a registered architect, is working on the design work for the planned partial remodel, and he's present tonight if you have any questions for him, but I'll be happy to answer any that might come up. We appreciate Mr. Duran's thorough staff report and his site visit with us a couple of weeks ago. It was very helpful to everyone, I think. We have no issue, my client has no issue with the recommended primary facade being the south facade, except we have one request. Mr. Duran noted that the entry portal on the south facade for the main entry, there's a photograph. It wasn't really a good photograph on the presentation, but it's page 42 of Mr. Murphy's HCPI. I'll pass this around if you like, but Mr. Murphy identifies the porch and door that were altered in 1990s. They're non-historic, and it's not you can see on his drawing of the primary facade, the entry portal is not part of the primary facade, it's in front of it. Mr. Duran recommended that the south facade be designated as primary due to the historic doors and windows. The entrance door is flanked by two divided light windows. Mr. Collatz does not propose to make any changes to the door or to the two windows, but he does plan to make some modifications to the non-historic entry portal to make it fit in better with the historic design of this house. And the request is that if you follow Mr. Duran's recommendation regarding designation of the southern facade as primary, we would request that you exclude 10 feet on either side of the entry so that we can hopefully avoid the need for an exception request to make modifications to the non-historic portal. That would serve Mr. Duran's recommendation of preserving the historic doors and windows, and also facilitate creation of what I think is going to be a more appropriate entry portal. So that's the only request that we have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them. Thank you.
Board members, questions or comments? Member Benvenue.
Madam Chair, actually for Paul, I guess I'm wondering what happened in 1995 and 1999 in these prior cases where approval was made for all these changes. There were no primary facades when those were approved?
Chair Rios, member Bienvenu, there was no primary facades that we were able to identify given to this structure. So we came before the board requesting primary facade designation.
Did you review the application or the staff reports or the findings and conclusions in either of those cases to see how that issue was addressed, to be making changes on a contributing structure, including alteration of windows and doors without knowing whether it was a primary facade or not?
Chair Rios, member Bienvenu, I did not see any case history on this structure next to the HCPI forms done in 1983 and in 1991.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm actually looking at the HICP. It references H95-016 and then H99-189. I assume those are prior H board applications.
Chair Rios,
doesn't
member Bienvenu. No, sir, I haven't seen those cases.
Okay. And I know from our site visit that you agree with, even under your own recommendation, that if the south facade is, if the board agrees that the south facade be primary, that the portal would not be, would be specifically excluded, correct?
Chair Rios, member Bienvenu, that is correct.
And I guess I would just say, since that would probably be my inclination in this case, with respect to the specific proposal of the applicant, I think my own view would be, I understand the point. I think it would be better addressed though, rather than trying to anticipate what redesign might be coming to us, and trying to account for that in advance would just be to exclude the portal and then see what the applicant comes back with. Because as you know, there still can be exceptions granted if those would be necessary to manage the type of renovation or actually replacement of a portal that you have in mind. So that would be my own way of wanting to deal with that at this point in time. That's all I have for now.
Anybody else? Questions, comments, member Guida?
I guess I'm wondering why we're talking about the south facade at all. John Murphy says when, that over the years, various projects have altered every aspect of the house. But when considering the hierarchy of the home's facades, the north inset portal plays an essential role in the design and communicates its origin and later use. The open walled room is a distinctive field that connects to the territorial period and its later use as an indoor-outdoor living space. Minor changes and intrusions such as the 1990s fireplace and of course that pergola, but overall the design and feeling remain intact. And for this reason, his recommendation is to maintain contributing and recommending the north portal minus the recent intrusions as the primary facade. And so, that seems to be a pretty eloquent, well-researched case for both status and the designation of facades. And all I've heard from staff is just there's some old windows and doors on the south facade. And I'm more convinced by the John Murphy recommendation than anything.
Paul, would you like to respond to that
Rios,
in reference specifically to that south facade?
Chair Rios, member Guida, at the site visit today and previously walking the property with the owner and Mr. Carnes, I believe due to the fireplace and due to the pergola, those additions detract from that facade. And the southern facade with the windows and doors, their window sills, the recessed windows, the divided light, single pane glass windows, they speak to that time of this structure, of more to the original construction of these structures. And I find that they are unaltered, maintaining the same apologize.
Yes.
moment, please. I
Heather.
apologize.
No worries. While Paul is trying to get the computer to back up, I did look at the 1995 case and there was no designation of primary facades. This request was for the addition to the east side of the building. At that time, it was approved. And there were a couple of conditions regarding the design, but there was no designation at that time of primary.
And I guess if I may continue, where,
Rita?
thank you, Madam Chair. I think where my concern lies is, we're looking for character defining features that convey the integrity of the property. And to me, it's not enough for something to just be old and intact. The features need to convey why this building contributes to the district and why it deserves a historic status. And to me, there's a much more persuasive argument for an inset portal that is related to a period of time. I think the pergola that was added is certainly reversible and barely looks attached to the house, could be excluded from the nomination. But I think, of the features, I would any day of the week vote for, a kind of a period indoor, outdoor room, recessed portal. That's architecture, rather than some old windows.
Thank you, Member Guida. I would say that if something is intact and it's old, I think that contributes very much to a building. That is things that we look at all the time. Is the footprint intact? Is the footprint intact? Are the windows, old windows, or the doors in the same location? Have the openings been altered? Those are things that we look at it all the time. And if something, that word intact, if something is intact, of course you're going to look at it. I would think that it's important. Of course, you have to see what contributes to how does this home contribute to the district? But the fact that the home and a lot of the footprint remains, a lot of it is over 100 years old. So the fact that you are indicating that many things on that south facade, the openings are intact and have been there for ages, correct?
Cheerios.
And that
that's correct.
footprint
That's
has
correct.
been there. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Member Benvenue.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Member Bienvenue and Madam Chair. I just would like to say that I am also more persuaded by the argument for the north inset portal that it's not merely inset, it's an entire room that's pretty unique. There's a nice photograph of it on our page 54 of our packet. Yeah, I just think that feature is not replicated in other properties. It's something worth preserving and character defining, to be sure. I would support the designation of the north facade minus the fireplace and the portal.
Is it your feeling that you would only support that feature and not the south facade?
I mean, the south facade also is very nice, but I think that like many of the buildings that we look at have very nice windows, historic fenestration, but the north inset portal is truly unique. Not something I have ever seen before, actually.
Thank you. Member Benvenue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So always an interesting discussion about primary facades. They are, and I knew we would have an interesting discussion about this house because it's quite difficult, I think, to make an easy decision about where the primary facades are. The reason I'm actually persuaded by both, and maybe that's where we end up, but the reason I do agree with staff is that I always come back to the fact that the primary facade is defined as one or more of the principal faces of the building. And that almost always implies the front. It doesn't have to be that, but principal face, which is the front, or elevation, as the code says, is going to lead you in more cases than not to what I consider to be primary. And it would be an unusual circumstance when that would not be the primary facade, in my opinion. In a case like this, it's really hard for me to imagine that that very small inset area on the back of the house as being the principal elevation of the entire contributing structure. But it is interesting and it is character defining. So I do certainly agree with the perspective that that would be a shame not to protect that, which is part of what a primary facade designation is intended to do. But I do think that if that was the only thing being designated, it really, I think that would be somewhat nonsensical in the sense of being such a negligible amount of the footprint of a contributing structure, having that being considered to be the principal elevation. It may be the most interesting or the most unique, but I just can't see it as being the principal elevation. That seems, especially on a site visit, to be indisputably that that long entryway that you find when you enter the property. And I'm also not completely persuaded that that always historic integrity alone is what defines a principal facade. I think that always defines a contributing structure, or has to be an element of that. But the principal facade is more about, once you've already designated it as contributing because of its integrity, now you're trying to define which of the facades is principal and captures the character of the building. And I think that the south facade meets both of those requirements, but I'm certainly persuaded that that small alcove on the north does as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Paul.
Rios, if I may share, this property is unique because it's an amalgamation of 3 structures that were pre-1914. So we know that. So we know that you can see that throughout this entire property when you walk it. It's just an incredible property. You can see it in the gabled roof. You can see it in the windows and doorways. You can see it in the sloping adobe walls on the corners. And the structure is borderline, in my eyes, significant. But because of the additions, the recent additions in the 80s and 90s, that may pull it back from being so. But you don't see many properties in the downtown and Eastside Historic District where 3 structures that are over 100 years old are all in now one structure that all have the same elements as they did when they were pre-1914. And that's what makes this home so unique. Thank you.
Well, anyone in this audience wishing to comment, please come forward.
Stephanie Benenato. I agree with staff's recommendation. And I think that it would be easy enough to remove that very small overhang or portal. And it is characteristic of that time period. I think you could also designate the north side as well, and maybe you should do both. But I find that I think that's been impacted more by the additions that I hope was allowed by the board. And I have to raise the question of, when you allow these kind of additions, then what happens to this one had no designation, but does that detract from designating that as a primary facade? because it has the pergola in front of it, which even though it may hardly be connected, it's incredibly distracting from the facade itself. Whereas on the south side, you don't have that kind of distraction. And so if you had to choose between one or the other, I think the south side would be the better one to preserve. Thank you.
Mr. John Eddy is coming down to comment. And John, you need to get sworn in, please.
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address.
My name is John Eddy. My address is number 14 Avenida Campo Verde, Santa
John.
Fe.
So sorry. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do so under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Sworn in.
Thank you. Madam Chair, board members, I really appreciate the robust discussion about this house. And I think it is a tricky thing to suss out what is important about it and what is not important about it. It's interesting. I grew up in this neighborhood, and the one image that I have in my brain from this neighborhood is the one of the carport with her car parked in front of it. It's black and white photograph. But I think what's been left out of this discussion, it does bear on status of this property, despite the fact that it has been through a number of alterations, despite its original integrity being intact. That is challenging for you folks. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that Laura Gilpin lived in this house and used it as her photography studio. She was one of the most important photographers in the Southwest and worked outside the Southwest as well. So that in and of itself, for me, drives a lot of the status designation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in this audience wishing to comment? Anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no. If I may just add something of interest that I've come across. I've been doing some research on the changes that may have been made to the house as a result. I found the 95016, but there was another case earlier on dealing with this, and there was some substantial archival research done at that time. And so I will read, Miss Elizabeth Wagner did some research on the property. And it says the 1928 directory shows an office at 409. The 1934 to 35 directory shows 409 and one rear building. By 1936 to 37, 3 rear listings appear in addition to 409. It can be assumed, therefore, that the front property was built first and the rear buildings added over time. In 1957, it appears that Laura Gilpin purchased the rear building and the guest house, and that Tony Ortiz owned 409 as he had since 1930. The ownership of Mr. Ortiz in the front and Miss Gilpin in the back, sharing a common wall and an entry from Camino Montesol, continued until 1970. The Gilpin property had rear door to the east alley, a guest house, and an orchard that extended down to Acequia Madre on the north. In 1976, Lewis Allen, the cousin of Laura Gilpin, purchased the front property and remodeled it into a darkroom and studio for Miss Gilpin. It seems that in 1971, Miss Gilpin had a photographic show or photo stolen, and with insurance money, she was able to build a kitchen where the breakfast room is today. So there's quite a bit of information here that was done. And in addition, there is a photograph from 1976 showing that little portal that's on, so it was constructed by 1976, the portal on the south elevation. So I know that just muddies the waters, but I thought you might like to know the record.
Anything else, board members? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd just like to, I guess I need to follow up on that last comment, because the HDRB says that our current HDRB, and I see there were ones done in the past, that the south elevation porch was built in 1995. Oh, but it actually says replaced porch with new design. So maybe what you're seeing is an old version of the porch that existed in 1976. That would make sense. Okay, so the current porch probably is still of recent vintage. Unless we have facts to the contrary of what Higby states. Agreed?
Yes, there's photographic evidence.
Okay, okay, great.
Okay, so, yes, Member Aguilar Madrona.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we bring up the facade diagram on the projector? I'm just thinking out loud here a bit. I know we don't like to be overly restrictive with primary facades, but I have seen in the past where we've had much smaller houses where I think we've even designated 3 primary facades in the past. And I'm not saying that's what I want to do here, but in my mind, I've kind of been having this like either or conversation with the north and the south. And, one option is that we could do both. I would have a really hard time, I think, supporting a motion that didn't at least include facade 13 on the north, which is the inset room. So I guess the question is, in my mind, is would it be best served to have a motion that just does the north and the south in its entirety? Or could we have a motion that does the south facade and 13, 14, and 12 of the north facade? Is what I'm thinking about right now.
Those things are up to the board. I think that's why we're here. We do, we hear everyone's points of view, and we do an analysis of the situation, hearing the concrete evidence that is being presented to us. And so it is up to the board to make the decision. And with that being said, I will entertain a motion unless there's further discussion. Member Beachlight?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make a motion for consideration. In case number 2024 00833334. Oh, sorry, 8334, yes. HDRB at 409 Camino de Montesol. I move to designate the south facade number 3 as primary, which excludes the westmost portal already, and also the hyphen that connects the 2 buildings. So I'll recommend we designate facade number 3 as primary, excluding the portal that's non-historic, and also facades number 14 and 13 to capture the north inset portal, excluding the fireplace that's been added and the pergola that blocks the view from the north.
Second.
And is there anything further to add? If not, roll call, please.
Vice Chair Guida,
No.
Member Aguilar Madrona,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Beescheid.
Yes.
Chair, the motion has passed.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to tell the owner, you have a lovely house and I love the garden. And actually, I'm your neighbor down the street at the Woodyard. And I don't know how long you've been there, but you've kept the house up very nicely. And the last case this evening is located at 216 Old Santa Fe Trail. And this is Lanny's case. Lanny, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is case 2024-008452 HDRB for 216 Old Santa Fe Trail for a status review. 216 Old Santa Fe Trail is on the west side of the road between East Water Street and East Alameda Street and across the road from the Laredo Hotel. 216 Old Santa Fe Trail is a non-residential structure located in the downtown and east side historic district. The status map shows that the front portion of the structure is contributing while the rear portion is non-contributing. The structure was constructed in a vernacular manner between 1956 and 1958. The 1984 HCPI form provides no information about the structure, and the 2024 HCPI reflects the changes that were made without permit or approval from the board in 2023. Aerial photography shows the structure in 1958 and with additions in 1978. The 1984 structure was entirely to the rear of the lot and still appeared as the original residence. A building permit for a detached family residence was issued in 2005. However, there's no indication that a second structure was ever built, as there is not a second structure in any aerial or photo, including the street image from Google Maps in Historic Districts Review Board case. It makes sense. In 2007, a tent structure is in this image and may be permitted structure from 2005. The structure was still in use in 2014, but is missing by 2015. The 2016 historic preservation case indicates that the property is listed as non-contributing to the Downtown and Eastside Historic District. This 2016 case requested the removal of the temporary tent structure and the construction of a 346 square foot addition on the east elevation and a 63 square foot addition to the north elevation. Additional work on the property in 2017 altered the face of the structure by enclosing windows and increasing the size of fenestrations to create the storefront as it appears in 2022. The structure as it exists today has no fenestrations on either the north or the south elevations. The east facade was altered again in 2023, creating a glass front. And while the single header from the 2016 conversion is still present, it is obscured by a new awning. The applicant is requesting a status review of the non-residential structure and designation of primary facades if they're applicable. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be designated as non-contributing due to its significant loss of historic integrity and inability to convey its original design and associated historical context per section 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures.
Thank you, Lanny. Questions for Lanny? Board members? Not at this time. Yes, Mr. Benvenu.
Just, thank you, Madam Chair. Just point of clarification on the existing designation. It seems that the map shows the front building, which is the new part of the structure, is contributing, and the back, which is the old building, is non-contributing. Is that right?
That is correct.
And do we have any explanation for that at all? Is that just an error in the map?
We think it's probably an error in the map, but we have no proof one way or the other. So that's what we're looking for, is to just establish that status. Which one is it supposed to be?
Okay. Makes sense. I mean, isn't it usually referred to as non-contributing in any of the, every time it's come before the board in the past?
The previous cases show it as non-contributing, yes.
It's just this map that seems to throw us off the scent, right? Okay, so. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Mr. Padilla, please get sworn in.
Will you please raise your right hand, state your name and address?
John Padilla, P.O. Box 22986, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Mr. Padilla, do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do so under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Madam Chair, Mr. Padilla has been sworn in.
John, what do you have to tell us? And do you agree with staff's recommendation?
Madam Chair, members of the board, before you tonight for status designation and the work that was done. There's a lot of legwork behind the scene on this one leading up to this meeting. Research that we did trying to determine legal lot of record and so forth, working with zoning to confirm the legal lot of record, working with historic staff to make sure that I actually identified we actually provided a new HDRB for the project. So there is a lot of information that's been provided for this, to get us to this point to move forward with historic status. I agree with the presentation this evening. The status map shows contributing in the back. So the status map shows in 216 point reference in the back of the structure, or what we'll call the west side of the property. And then it has the non-contributing on the back on the east west side of the property. To the east, there's a portion that is designated as contributing, and then the area in front of it was the addition approved in 2016. So in essence, we have the building that you see today with no designation. So yes, we agree with the staff report and the findings of the staff, our research along with staff's research, and do stand for non-contributing status for this property.
Questions, comments? Member Benvenu.
Madam Chair, so yeah, this seems pretty obvious to me that this is non-contributing building, but it's also obvious, as I'm sure you know, that it's non-conforming and without approval. So I would assume that plans are being made to bring it into conformance with both the previous approval by the board, as well, conditions of approval, as well as the ordinance.
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, the case before you this evening is for status review. We were paused on information that we brought forward for a review for 216 Old Santa Fe Trail. That submission was paused for us to be able to designate or confirm status for the property right now. Once that is done, then I believe we will move forward with the next appropriate action as required by the Historic District Ordinance.
Thank you.
Anything else, board members? Nothing? Anyone in the public wanting to comment?
Stephanie Beninato, excuse me. I think it's pretty obvious that this building has become non-contributing, even if it was contributing at some point. I think what is distressing, and I'm happy that Member Bienvenue brought it up, was the fact that this building did not conform to whatever plans that were approved. And certainly 2023 change was just without any kind of permission at all. I'm also amazed that it's right in downtown and that nobody from the historic preservation enforcement staff actually even noticed this happening. To me, it's appalling that the owner didn't get approval and the staff doesn't notice. I do hope that they will come into conformance with the streetscape and what would be considered harmonious with the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to comment on this project that's in this audience? No? Anyone on Zoom?
Everybody else, no.
Thank you. Motion, please, board members? Oh, yes, Paul.
Chair Rios, members of the board, Historic Preservation Division staff is working diligently at 216 and 214 Old Santa Fe Trail. We are doing our best. And it's not, things are getting done and we're trying to prevent it from happening, but it keeps happening. We're doing our best, just so the board members know. Thank you.
Did you have something, Mr. Padilla?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to add one last point. The presentation this evening is one that is easy for me to present this evening. As we move forward, there are circumstances that I will share with you and with the board as we move forward. But know that my practice is one of openness and making sure that rules and laws are followed, and to make sure that we are in compliance not only with the historic ordinances but also the land use code in the city of Santa Fe. So I just wanted to express that to you. This presentation this evening is to get us to the next step.
Okay, John, thank you. I will entertain a motion, please. Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Case 2024-008-452 HDRB at 216 Old Santa Fe Trail. I would move based on the record presented, the application and the staff report, findings be entered, agreeing with the position in the staff report and their recommendation, and that the designation of the entire building be non-contributing. But I just want to add a comment to that. It's not really a condition, but I do think this is an unusual case where we're not looking down the road to see what changes might be coming before us. I'm looking at what changes have already been made. I would be very unhappy if we didn't have this altered, either through a subsequent application or through enforcement action by the city, to ensure that this building be either preferably exactly what was approved previously by the board and return to that, or something equivalent if the applicant chooses instead to bring expeditiously a new application for renovation to the board. But if it's not expeditious, I would urge the city to take enforcement action.
Is there a second to the motion?
Madrano will second.
Vote, roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Bescheid.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion has passed.
Good, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, if anything under discussion items,
At this time, Cheria?
nothing. Board members, anything from the board? Nothing. Everybody's hungry and wanting to leave. Oh, we do have something from Member Beach.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to say, I will unfortunately miss both meetings in July. My apologies.
And let's see, I will be gone the second week in July, so if that clashes with a board meeting, I will not be here either. Alrighty, our next meeting is July the 9th. And I will entertain a
Madam
motion.
Chair,
Yeah.
one quick comment or question to Heather perhaps, or to Gary, following up on the early discussion about the Historic Santa Fe Foundation's program. One of the properties, and I couldn't think of it in time to ask while the presentation was happening, what that I think would be appropriate would be 718 Old Santa Fe Trail, which we heard several months ago. And if that wasn't on the list that HDRB provided, I think that would be appropriate to put on it.
Arios, Member Bienvenu, just an update on 718 Old Santa Fe Trail. There was an appeal filed regarding the Historic Districts Review Board decision as to status. Unfortunately, that appeal was not timely in the filing. So at this point, certainly there was a time in which we couldn't consider anything.
Sure.
But certainly we will consider that, and I'll pass that along.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
It was considered, but one of the requirements is that the owner has to live in the residence, and then they do not live in the residence. Correct, yeah.
I just want to bring something up very quickly. Today, when we were on Old Santa Fe Trail, there was a building right at the corner, across from La Fonda. And, I noticed that the board approved this building with, windows. And they are really low. There's like barely like a foot, really close to the street. And I'm just bringing this up. So in the future, I think we really need to look at that closely because other buildings in the area have some kind of substance, wall space. And this one was really low. It was, I believe, an error on our part. It's right across the street from La Fonda. It's the corner. Yeah, do you remember? Okay. Good. Just something to put into our heads in the future. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Guida moves to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu, Member Aguilar Madrono,
Yes.
Member Bichette.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion